Good morning. I'm Cynthia Jan Catarino, and we are here today at Neighborhood Services to give you a tutorial on creating a good newsletter. Now, what I need you to do before we get started, pencil and pen, pieces of paper, because you're going to want to take notes of what you hear, because we're going to include a questionnaire with 5 questions that you'll need to answer. When you answer these questions and send us the answers, then we will give you points towards your grant. You can send those answers to Amanda Miller or Cynthia McAllister. And if for some reason you don't have those emails, simply call the office at 625-2175 and we'll get you those email addresses so you can send your answered questionnaire into us so that you can get points toward getting your grant for your neighborhood. So we're going to stop right here and put that questionnaire up so that you can read and listen to all the questions, and then we'll move into the meat of the matter. Your newsletter needs to have a purpose. List 3 possible purposes that we mentioned in the video. What did we say is the most important thing to think about when creating a newsletter for your neighborhood? Why should you not include people's personal information in your newsletter? List 2 things that improve the layout or design of your newsletter. We mentioned 3 different ways to distribute your newsletter. List them. Well, all right, you're back now, and we're going to get started by talking about the purpose for your newsletter. First, you need to decide the purpose of your newsletter. Why are you publishing a neighborhood newsletter? Think about the group you are reaching. What do you hope to accomplish? How will the newsletter benefit the readers? Here's a list of some possible purposes to consider. Informing neighbors and readers about neighborhood activities, meeting summaries, upcoming meetings, and local events. Sharing important resources such as a neighborhood directory or city department contacts. Educating readers about ideas and issues that concern your neighborhood. Reminding residents of local ordinances and rules and regulations for the neighborhood. Commending volunteers, local businesses, and others who've had a positive impact on your neighborhood. Motivating residents to join your neighborhood association, and building community pride and uniting your neighborhood. After you know your purpose, the second thing you want to think about is your publishing schedule. If you're just starting the newsletter process, it is probably better not to be overly ambitious. Remember, quality is better than quantity. Whether you publish 2 or 12 newsletters per year, you want to deliver something that will actually be read and not thrown away in the junk mail. The next subject that we're going to move to is content. And it's probably the most important thing to think about when creating a newsletter for your neighborhood. Remember to include variety when planning your newsletter content. Be sure to include fun, helpful articles that your readers will enjoy. Your content should also include information that is practical and useful. Articles that are educational, that give tips and insights into community concerns, and that provide helpful resources are very useful to most readers. It is also important to include upbeat, entertaining articles such as neighbors' accomplishments and honors, a word puzzle, a joke. Remember, you want people to read your newsletter. You will be more successful if you give them something that leaves them with positive feelings. Content is typically either neighborhood news or reader interest articles. Here is a list of content ideas for both. Neighborhood news. Updates from recent neighborhood meetings. Notices of meetings and community events, issues and concerns that affect the neighborhood, relevant local news, and ordinances, rules, and regulations reminders. Reader interest articles, home improvement, energy saving tips, recipes, gardening and car repair, money management, health and employment, word puzzles and jokes, sections for children with coloring pages or fun facts, community history, neighbor accomplishments, commendations of residents, and recognition of volunteer efforts. Now, this is a special note about content. Since identity theft is a real issue, we recommend that you do not include any specifically personal information in your newsletter. Announcing birthdays in your publication may seem like a nice gesture, but it can alert wrongdoers into looking for packages left at the door or cards with monetary gifts in the mailbox. Protecting your neighbors should be your top priority. If you choose to include content that gives people's personal information, you should always get their permission first. You also want to avoid using other people's works or photos without getting prior permission. Be careful not to print anything that is not completely accurate, and remember to avoid defamatory content. Now, we're going to move on to writing and editing. After you have decided the content that you want to include, it is time to write and edit the articles. This is a great opportunity to involve your neighbors. Maybe you have a car mechanic that lives in your neighborhood. Ask him to provide car care tips for your newsletter. You can also ask a gardener who lives in your neighborhood to provide an article with planting tips. Be sure to ask your writers to use a friendly and conversational tone. Be simple and direct. It is the best to avoid jargon and never hassle your readers. Newsletters that contain long lists of rules, warnings, and potential sanctions for violators will not build your readership. Remember, names make news. Use your newsletter to thank volunteers and contributors by name. Never include the name in print of rule violators or constant complainers. Remember, keep it positive. The next thing to think about are the design and layout of your newsletter. Make sure your pages are laid out and designed clearly. Use headlines to identify the topics of each article. Decide on the format and the length of your newsletter. Some of the things that you might need to consider are page size. 8.5 by 11 or 11 by 17 are recommended depending on how many pages your newsletter is. Columns. 2 or 3 columns per 8.5 by 11 page makes your publication easy to read. Type and font. Choose a simple font style such as Times New Roman and a 10 or 11 point size. Type alignment. Left justified type is easier to read. White spaces. This gives your readers' eyes a chance to rest and should be along the edge of your newsletter. Photos and graphics. These add to the readability of your newsletter. People like to look at photos of their community, their neighbors, and themselves. Photos can also be a good space filler. Using charts and diagrams are another effective way to convey information to your readers. Lists and bullet points make an article easier to read. Branding. Having a logo, graphic, or page layout that reflects the personality of your neighborhood in each issue is a good marketing tool that will strengthen your publication. Regular features. This gives readers something to look forward to in each issue. Final steps. Be sure to edit and proofread your newsletter. This needs repeating. Be sure to edit and proofread your newsletter. This is extremely important because you don't want a glaring typo or an error such as a wrong date or phone number in your publication. Try to recruit a couple of people to help you proof it. Sometimes fresh eyes catch something that you may have missed. Now you are ready to print copies of your newsletter to distribute. Neighborhood Services offers black and white printing free of charge for neighborhood newsletters. Color copies are 15 cents per page. Contact Cynthia McAllister at 625-2175 for more information on our copying services. The final step is distribution of your newsletter. Distribution methods include hand delivery, mail, or email, or a combination of all three. Neighborhood Services recommends hand delivery as the preferred method. It gets residents out in the neighborhood to distribute the newsletter. Be sure to educate them on where they should place them. It is illegal to put newsletters inside mailboxes. Make sure every resident in your neighborhood gets a copy of your newsletter. An additional note: when we are able to reopen our doors to the public, we have a community computer that you are welcome to use to create and edit your newsletter. Our staff is available to help with guidance at any time. You can even mail us your rough draft, and we will be happy to take a look at it and provide suggestions. And that's the end of our Create a Good Newsletter tutorial. I will put the questionnaire up again so that you can look at your questions. And happy writing and good newsletters. It was great talking to y'all. Have a good rest of the day.